Do you believe a woman can change an entire town just by refusing to kneel? Spring of 1882, Redemption, Arizona Territory. 30 miles south of Tombstone, dust settled on everything like a second skin. Aita stood in the center of the main street, blood trickling from her mouth where Pete Grady's hand had just landed. She did not cry out. Screaming only made men like Pete hit harder. Around her, a crowd gathered like vultures. Women whispered behind gloved hands. Men leaned against hitching posts with the blank indifference that comes from watching cruelty become ordinary. Pete Grady spat tobacco juice onto the red dirt near Aita's feet. He was a thick man with a butcher's hands and a butcher's temperament. Blood stained his apron from the morning's work. Now he wanted different blood. "Thought I told you to stay out of my shop," Pete said, circling her slowly. "Thought I made it clear that Apache trash ain't welcome near decent folk." Aita said nothing. Her dark eyes tracked his movement with the patience of someone who had survived worse than Pete Grady could imagine. Her long black hair hung loose past her shoulders, tangled with dust. She wore a simple cotton dress, faded from too many washings, and boots that had walked more miles than most people in Redemption would travel in their entire lives. She had only wanted to buy salt. That was all, just salt for preserving what little meat she could afford. But wanting and getting were two different countries when your skin marked you as unwanted. Pete raised his hand again. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for the violence they pretended to disapprove of. This was entertainment in a town where entertainment came scarce. Then a voice cut through the morning air like a blade through silk. "That's enough." The words came quiet, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that makes men pause and reconsider their next action. A figure stepped down from a black gelding tied near the general store. Tall, maybe 6 feet, with shoulders that suggested he could handle himself in situations where talk failed. He wore a black hat pulled low, dark pants, and a shirt that had seen labor. A gun belt sat on his hips, not for show, but for purpose. His face was weathered in the way faces get when they have seen things that cannot be unseen. Lines creased the corners of his eyes, gray touched his temples. But his jaw was firm and his gaze steady as he walked toward the center of the street where Aita stood and Pete Grady loomed. Pete turned, puffing himself up the way small men do when challenged. "This ain't your concern, mister." "I'm making it my concern." The stranger stopped 10 feet away, hands loose at his sides, not threatening, but not backing down either. "The lady's leaving with me." Pete laughed, and several men in the crowd joined him. "Lady? That's a squaw, friend, and she ain't going nowhere except back to whatever hole she crawled out of." The stranger's expression did not change. He simply looked at Pete the way a man might look at a dog that had forgotten its training. Then, without warning or ceremony, he closed the distance between them in 3 strides and drove his fist into Pete Grady's jaw. The sound was like an axe hitting green wood. Pete dropped without a sound, folding onto the dirt like a puppet with cut strings. Silence spread across the street, the kind of silence that comes after thunder, when everyone is still feeling the vibration in their bones. The stranger turned to Aita and held out his hand. "Can you stand?" She looked at his hand, then at his face, searching for the trap she knew must be there. Men did not help Apache women. Men did not step between Pete Grady and his entertainment. Men did not risk their standing in a town like Redemption for someone like her. But his eyes held no mockery, no pity either, which was somehow better. Just a simple question, waiting for a simple answer. She took his hand and stood. His grip was calloused and steady. "You have somewhere to go?" he asked. "No." "You do now." He turned and walked toward his horse, not checking to see if she followed, simply assuming she would. And because there was nowhere else to go and no other options presenting themselves, Aita followed. The crowd parted without a word. Behind her, Pete Grady groaned and rolled onto his side, spitting blood. Ahead, the stranger untied his gelding and swung into the saddle with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time on horseback than on foot. He reached down. "Come on. It's a 2-hour ride." Aita hesitated only a moment before taking his hand again. He pulled her up behind him with surprising gentleness. She settled onto the horse's back, uncertain where to put her hands. "Hold on to me or the saddle," he said. "Your choice, but we're moving fast." She chose the saddle. They rode out of Redemption at a canter, leaving dust and whispers in their wake. Aita did not look back. There was nothing behind her worth seeing, only the same hatred that had followed her from town to town across the territory for the past year, ever since Thomas Keene died and left her alone in a world that had no place for Apache widows married to white soldiers. The stranger said nothing for the first hour. He kept the horse at a steady pace, not pushing hard, but not dawdling either. The land rolled past in shades of red and gold, dotted with sage and creosote. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the pale sky. Finally, as they crested a low ridge, he spoke. "Name's Caleb Morrow. Used to be a Texas Ranger. Now I just run cattle." Aita said nothing. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Caleb continued, his voice carrying easily over the sound of hoofbeats. "But where we're going, I need to call you something. Can't just keep saying, 'Hey, you.'" She considered this. Then quietly, "Aita." "Aita." He repeated it carefully, getting the pronunciation right on the first try. "That's a good name. Means first to dance, doesn't it?" She was surprised he knew. Most white men could not tell one Apache word from another and did not care to learn. "Yes." "Well, Aita, here's how this is going to work. I have a ranch about 10 miles south of Redemption. Black Mesa, folks call it. Not much to look at, but it's mine and it's solid. I need help running it, and you need a place where men like Pete Grady can't get at you. Seems like we can help each other." "Why?" The question came before she could stop it. "Why what?" "Why help me?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, gone softer somehow. "Because I'm tired of watching good people get hurt, while bad people do nothing. Because my mama raised me to believe that a man's worth is measured by how he treats folks who can't defend themselves. And because—" he paused. "Because it's the right thing to do. That reason enough?" Aita did not answer. She was not sure there was an answer that made sense in a world where right and wrong seemed to change depending on the color of your skin. They rode in silence for another hour. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into a furnace. Sweat trickled down Aita's back, but she did not complain. She had endured worse than heat. Finally, they topped a rise, and Caleb pulled the horse to a stop. Below them, a valley spread out like a rumpled blanket, green with spring grass. A creek wound through the center, flanked by cottonwoods. And there, on a slight elevation near the creek, stood a house. It was not grand. 2 stories of rough timber and stone, with a wide porch facing east and a barn set back about 50 yards. Corrals held maybe 20 head of cattle, and chickens scratched in the dirt near what looked like a small vegetable garden. "That's home," Caleb said. "Not much, but it keeps the rain off." He urged the horse forward, and they descended into the valley. As they approached, Aita studied the ranch with the eye of someone who had learned to assess places quickly for safety and escape routes. The house sat solid, well-maintained. The barn had a new roof. The fences were straight and strong. This was not the home of a lazy man. Caleb dismounted near the porch and offered his hand to help Aita down. She ignored it and slid off herself, landing lightly. He smiled, just a small quirk of his mouth, then turned to tend to the horse. "There's a well pump around the side of the house," he said over his shoulder. "Water's clean and cold. Help yourself. I'll be inside in a minute." Aita found the pump and worked the handle until water gushed out, clear and sweet. She drank deeply, then splashed her face, washing away the dust and dried blood. The cold water shocked her skin awake. When she entered the house, she found Caleb in the kitchen, building a fire in the cast-iron stove. The interior was sparse but clean. A table with 4 chairs, a cupboard stocked with supplies, a parlor visible through a doorway with 2 worn chairs and a stone fireplace. Stairs leading up to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything was orderly, too orderly for a man living alone. Caleb noticed her looking around. "My wife kept things tidy. I try to honor that, though I'm not as good at it as she was." He paused, then added quietly, "She died 3 years back. Influenza. Took our daughter, too. Sarah. She was 8. "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, but they were all Aita had. "Appreciated." Caleb pulled a coffee pot from a shelf and began preparing it. "You know coffee?" "Yes." "Good, because I make terrible tea, but decent coffee." That's about the extent of my cooking skills. If you can make anything that doesn't taste like boot leather, you're already ahead of me. Was that humor? Aita looked at him more carefully. His face remained serious, but something in his eyes suggested he was making a joke, testing to see if she would respond. She felt her mouth twitch, almost a smile. Almost. Caleb caught it, and his own expression softened. "There. That's better. You should smile more. World's got enough frowning as it is." He poured 2 cups of coffee when it was ready and set one in front of her. Then he sat down across the table, wrapping his hands around his own cup. "Here's how I see it, Aita. You need protection and a roof. I need help running this place. I'm not asking you to marry me, though if anyone asks in town, I might say you're my wife. Only way folks will respect you enough to leave you alone." He took a sip of coffee. "That's it okay with you?" Aita considered. It was practical, strategic even. And it cost her nothing she was not already willing to give. "Yes." "Good. You can have the room upstairs on the right. I'm on the left. There's a lock on your door if you want it. I won't bother you at night or any other time. You have my word on that." "Why do I believe you?" The question surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. Caleb smiled, a real smile this time. "Because you're smart enough to know when a man means what he says. Now drink your coffee before it gets cold. Then I'll show you around, and we can figure out what needs doing." They spent the rest of the afternoon in a strange dance of silence and work. Caleb showed her the barn, the chicken coop, the garden plot that needed weeding. He explained the routine. Feed the animals at dawn, check the fence lines twice a week, keep an eye on the creek for any signs of cattle wandering too far. Aita listened and absorbed, asking few questions but missing nothing. This was survival, and survival was something she understood better than most. As evening approached, Caleb started to prepare dinner, which turned out to be salt pork and beans. Aita watched him struggle with the pot for about 5 minutes, before gently nudging him aside. "Let me." She took over, adding water to stretch the beans, finding wild onions in the garden that Caleb had overlooked, adjusting the heat so the pork would not burn. Within 30 minutes, the smell filling the kitchen was rich and savory. Caleb sat at the table, watching with unconcealed appreciation. "Okay, you're officially in charge of meals. I surrender." They ate in comfortable quiet, the kind that comes when words would only clutter the space. Outside, crickets began their evening song. The wind rustled through the cottonwoods. After dinner, Aita cleaned the dishes while Caleb disappeared upstairs. He returned carrying a Winchester rifle. "You know how to shoot?" he asked. "Bow and arrow."
"Out here, you need a gun." He held it out to her. "This belonged to my wife. Never did like seeing it just sit in the closet. Tomorrow, I'll teach you how to use it. That okay?" Aita took the rifle, feeling its weight. It was heavier than she expected, but balanced well. "Yes." "Good." Caleb stretched, his back popping. "I'm turning in. Long day. You need anything? I'm across the hall." He started toward the stairs, then paused. "Aita?" "Yes?" "I'm glad you're here. Place feels less empty now." He climbed the stairs before she could respond, leaving her standing in the kitchen with a rifle in her hands and something unfamiliar warming in her chest. Something that might have been hope. That night, Aita lay in the small bedroom on the right side of the second floor. The bed was soft, softer than anything she had slept on in over a year. Clean sheets. A quilt that smelled like cedar. Through the window, she could see stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. For the first time since Thomas died, she slept without fear. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Caleb moving around downstairs. Dawn light filtered through the window, painting everything gold. Aita dressed quickly and descended to find Caleb at the stove, attempting breakfast with limited success. "Morning," he said. "I was trying to make eggs." Key word being trying. Aita moved him aside again, this time with something that might have been amusement, and took over. Within minutes, eggs sizzled in the pan alongside strips of salt pork. She found flour and made quick flatbread, Apache style, cooking it directly on the stovetop. They ate on the porch, watching the sun climb and the valley wake up. Cattle lowed in the distance. Birds called to each other in the cottonwoods. "You learned to cook like that from your people?" Caleb asked. "My mother. Before—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Caleb nodded, understanding what was left unsaid. "She taught you well." After breakfast, he brought out the Winchester again. They walked to an open area beyond the barn, where he had set up old cans on fence posts. "First thing you need to know," Caleb said, loading the rifle, "is that this thing kicks like a Missouri mule. First time you shoot, it'll probably knock you on your backside. That's normal. Don't let it scare you." He demonstrated the proper stance, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze the trigger gently rather than jerking it. Then he handed the rifle to Aita. She settled it against her shoulder, feeling the weight distribute through her body. Found the sight picture. Breathed out, in halfway, and held. Squeezed. The rifle roared and bucked. Aita staggered back 2 steps, but kept her feet barely. The can remained untouched. Caleb grinned. "Better than my first time. I ended up on my ass in the dirt. Try again." They spent 2 hours practicing. By the end, Aita could hit the cans 3 times out of 5, and the rifle's kick no longer surprised her. Her shoulder would be bruised tomorrow, but she did not care. This was power. This was protection. As they walked back to the house, Caleb suddenly stopped, his hand going to his gun. Aita followed his gaze and saw 3 riders approaching from the north, moving fast enough to raise dust, but not so fast as to seem urgent. "That's Sheriff Pike," Caleb said quietly, "and 2 of his deputies. Stay behind me." The riders pulled up near the house. Sheriff Luther Pike was a lean man with a mustache that drooped past his chin and eyes that never seemed to focus on anything directly. He wore a badge that caught the morning sun. "Morrow," Pike said, not dismounting. "Heard you brought something back from town yesterday." "Heard right. My wife needed supplies." Pike's eyes flicked to Aita, then back to Caleb. His smile was unpleasant. "Wife, huh? That's interesting, seeing as how nobody in Redemption recalls you being married." "Recent development." "That's so?" Pike shifted in his saddle. "Well, here's the thing, Morrow. We got rules in Redemption. Can't have just anyone settling in, especially not Indians. Makes folks nervous. Mr. Crane in particular. He don't like complications in his territory." At the mention of Crane's name, Caleb's expression hardened. "Zeke Crane? That's who you're running errands for now?" "Mr. Crane is an important man. Owns a lot of land around here. Has big plans. And he don't need trouble." Pike leaned forward. "You understand what I'm saying?" "I understand you're standing on my land making threats." Caleb's hand rested casually near his gun. "I also understand that you're supposed to be keeping the peace, not disturbing it. So, here's what you're going to do, Sheriff. You're going to turn those horses around and ride back to town. And you're going to tell Zeke Crane that Caleb Morrow isn't selling, isn't leaving, and isn't intimidated by hired thugs with badges." Pike's face flushed red. "You're making a mistake. Wouldn't be the first time, won't be the last." Caleb's voice stayed level, but something dangerous crept into it. "Now get off my land." For a long moment, the 2 men stared at each other. Then Pike jerked his reins and wheeled his horse around. His deputies followed. As they rode away, Pike called back over his shoulder, "This ain't over, Morrow. You were a ranger once. You know how these things end." They watched until the riders disappeared over the ridge. Only then did Caleb relax slightly, though his jaw remained tight. Aita stepped beside him. "Who is Crane?" Caleb's expression turned bitter. "Zeke Crane. Used to ride with me when I was a ranger. We were partners until I found out he was taking bribes, stealing from folks he was supposed to protect. I turned him in, got him kicked off the force. That was 6 years ago. Guess he landed on his feet." "He wants this land?" "He wants all the land around here. Southern Pacific Railroad is coming through eventually. Whoever controls the land controls the route, and whoever controls the route controls a fortune." Caleb looked at her. "I'm sorry. Didn't mean to pull you into a war." Aita thought about this, about Caleb standing between her and Pete Grady, about him offering her safety when no one else would, about the quiet respect in his voice when he taught her to shoot. "I've been in wars before," she said. "At least this time, I choose which side." Caleb smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "Then we better get ready, because Crane's not the kind to give up easy." That evening, as the sun painted the sky orange and red, Aita and Caleb sat on the porch. He whittled a piece of wood while she cleaned the Winchester. Neither spoke much, but the silence felt different now. Not empty, but full of understanding. In the distance, a figure on horseback appeared on the ridgeline. Too far to identify, but close enough to know they were being watched. Caleb saw it too. He set down his knife and reached for his rifle. The figure did not move, just sat there, silhouetted against the dying light. Then, slowly, deliberately, the rider turned and disappeared over the ridge. "Message received," Caleb muttered. Aida checked the Winchester's chamber, making sure it was loaded. "They will come back." "I know." "What do we do?" Caleb looked at her, his expression serious but not afraid. "We do what we have to. We protect what's ours. Together." Aida met his eyes and nodded once. Together. That night, neither of them slept easily. They both knew that Zeke Crane had declared war. And in the Arizona Territory of 1882, wars were settled with blood and bullets, not lawyers and paper. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Aida was not running. She was not hiding. She was standing her ground, and she was not standing alone. This is the story of a woman who learned to fight back, a man who found purpose again, and a town that would be forced to choose between fear and justice. The story was just beginning. The morning after Sheriff Pike's visit, Caleb woke before dawn. He dressed quietly and went downstairs to find Aida already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had learned to survive on little sleep. "You were up early," Caleb said, pouring himself a cup. "Could not sleep, thinking about the men who will come." Caleb nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. Zeke Crane was not a man who accepted defiance lightly. The visit from Pike was only the opening move in a longer game. "We need supplies," Caleb said, "and we need to let folks know what's happening. Can't fight Crane alone." Who would help us? It was a fair question. Redemption was a town that had learned to look the other way when powerful men did terrible things. But Caleb knew there were still good people there, people who were tired of living in fear. Sam Hutchins, for one. The doc. He's got a spine, even if he doesn't show it much. And there are others. Folks who've lost land to Crane's schemes. They're scared, but scared people can be brave if someone gives them a reason. Aida considered this. "When do we go?" "This afternoon, but first we finish your shooting lessons." They spent the morning at the makeshift range. Aida's accuracy improved with each round. By midday, she could hit 5 cans out of 7, and the rifle no longer surprised her with its kick. She moved with it now, letting the recoil flow through her body rather than fighting it. Caleb watched with approval. "You're a natural. Give it another week, and you'll be better than half the men in the territory." Will a week be enough? The question hung between them. They both knew the answer. "We work with what we've got," Caleb said finally. "Come on, let's head to town." The ride to Redemption took 2 hours. They said little, both conserving their energy for whatever confrontation might come. The sun climbed higher, turning the air into a furnace. Heat shimmered off the red earth in waves. As they entered town, people stopped what they were doing to stare. Word had spread about Caleb's confrontation with Pete Grady, about the Apache woman he claimed as his wife. Whispers followed them down the main street like shadows. They tied their horses outside Doc Hutchins' office, a small building near the church. Caleb knocked twice before entering. Sam Hutchins looked up from a medical journal, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He was a spare man in his late 60s, with white hair and steady hands that had set more bones and delivered more babies than anyone else in 3 counties. "Caleb," Sam said, standing. His eyes moved to Aida, and something like relief crossed his face. "I heard you were all right. Glad to see it's true." "Sam, this is Aida. Aida, Doc Hutchins." He's about the only man in redemption worth trusting." Sam extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Aita took it. His grip was firm, but gentle. "Pleased to meet you properly, ma'am. I've seen you around town. Wished I could have done more to help." "You helped when others would not," Aita said quietly. "That is enough." Sam gestured to chairs. "Sit. Tell me what's on your mind, Caleb. And don't say nothing, because I know that look." Caleb explained Pike's visit, the threat from Crane, the way things were shaping up. Sam listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail.
When Caleb finished, Sam removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "I was afraid of this. Crane's been buying up land for months now. 12 families have sold in the past year, most of them for half what their property was worth. The ones who refused—" He trailed off. "What happened to them?" Aita asked. "Accidents, fires, cattle rustling. One man got trampled by his own horse, though folks say the horse had been spooked by gunfire. Sheriff Pike investigated every incident and found nothing suspicious. Nothing he was willing to put in a report, anyway." Caleb leaned forward. "What's Crane's endgame?" "Southern Pacific Railroad. They're surveying routes through the territory. Whoever controls the land controls where the rails go. And whoever controls that controls millions in freight, passenger traffic, and land speculation." Sam put his glasses back on. "Crane's working with railroad executives. He buys the land cheap, sells it to the railroad for 10 times what he paid, and everyone profits except the people who actually worked the land." "Then we stop him," Caleb said simply. Sam laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Stop Zeke Crane? He's got Pike in his pocket, half the town council on his payroll, and enough hired guns to start a small war. What are you going to do, Caleb? Challenge him to a duel?" "If I have to, but I was hoping for something smarter." Caleb stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dusty street. "Crane operates in the shadows because that's where he's safe. What if we drag him into the light? What if we get proof of what he's doing and bring in federal law?" "That's a tall order. Crane's careful. Doesn't leave evidence lying around." "Everyone makes mistakes. We just need to find his." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sam called out, "Come in." The door opened slowly. A young woman stood in the doorway, thin as a rail, with haunted eyes and bruises fading to yellow on her arms. She wore a dress 2 sizes too large and held a slate board in her hands. Caleb recognized her from around town. Mary Sullivan, the girl who could not speak, daughter of a widow who had remarried poorly. Mary stepped inside and closed the door behind her. Her eyes found Aita, and something passed between them, a recognition that needed no words. One survivor seeing another. Sam stood. "Mary, what brings you here?" Mary lifted her slate board. On it, written in careful script, "I need help. He will kill me if I go back." Sam's face went soft with compassion. "Your stepfather?" Mary nodded. Caleb looked at Sam, then at Mary, then at Aita. He saw the way Aita's hands had clenched into fists, the way her jaw tightened. He knew that look. He had seen it in the mirror often enough. "She comes with us," Aita said. Not a question, a statement. "Now hold on," Sam began. "We can't just take her. There are laws, procedures." "The law has not protected her," Aita said quietly. "Look at her arms. Look at her eyes. The law is words on paper. We are real." Caleb met Sam's gaze. The old doctor sighed and nodded. "All right, but this complicates things.
Mary's stepfather works for Crane, man named Luther Hicks, one of Crane's enforcers. When he finds out she's gone, he'll come looking. Let him look, Caleb said. He won't find her. Mary was already writing on her slate. She held it up. I heard them talking, Crane and my stepfather. They plan to attack your ranch in 3 days. 7 men. They will burn everything. The room went silent. 3 days. 7 men. It was worse than Caleb had expected, but not surprising. Why are you telling us this? Caleb asked gently. Mary erased her slate and wrote again. Because you are the first person who ever stood up to them. Because she looks at me like I am human. She pointed at Aita.
Because I am tired of being afraid. Aita stood and walked to Mary. She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. You're safe now, I promise. Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she did not make a sound. She simply nodded and leaned slightly into Aita's touch. Sam cleared his throat. If you're taking Mary, you need to leave now. Luther will come here first when he realizes she's missing. I'll tell him I haven't seen her, but he won't believe me for long. What about you? Caleb asked. Crane will figure out you're helping us. I'm an old man, Caleb. I've spent too many years keeping my head down, watching bad things happen to good people. Maybe it's time I grew a spine. Sam smiled, and it was almost peaceful. Besides, every war needs a medic. They left through the back door. As they mounted their horses, with Mary sitting behind Aita, Caleb noticed movement across the street. A man in a long coat, watching them. The man turned and walked quickly toward the saloon where Crane kept an office. We've been seen, Caleb said. Then we ride fast. Aita kicked her horse into motion. They thundered out of Redemption, dust rising behind them like smoke signals. Caleb kept looking back, expecting to see riders pursuing them, but the road stayed empty. That worried him more than pursuit would have. Crane was planning something, and whatever it was, it would not be simple. Back at Black Mesa, they settled Mary into a small room off the kitchen that had once been a pantry. It was cramped but warm, with a window facing the garden. Mary explored it with the wonder of someone who had never had space that was truly hers. That evening, as they ate dinner, Mary wrote question after question on her slate. Where was Aita from? How did she meet Caleb? Was she really his wife? Could she teach her to shoot? Aita answered patiently, her voice soft. Caleb watched the two of them and felt something shift in his chest. This was what Black Mesa had been missing. Not just people, but purpose. Not just survival, but something worth protecting. After Mary went to bed, Caleb and Aita sat on the porch. The night was cool, stars brilliant overhead. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote sang its lonely song. 3 days, Aita said. 3 days, Caleb agreed. We need help. 7 men is too many for just us. You said there were good people in town. Can they fight? Some can. Most are farmers, shopkeepers. But desperate people can surprise you. Caleb lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the darkness. I'm going to ride out tomorrow, see who I can find. People Crane has hurt. People who might be ready to push back. I will come with you. No, I need you here with Mary. Teach her to shoot, to defend herself. If I'm not back by the 2nd day, you take her and ride north. There's a town called Benson, 30 miles away. You'll be safe there. Aita turned to look at him. I do not run anymore. This isn't running. This is surviving to fight another day. And if you do not come back? Caleb smiled in the darkness.
Then I trust you to finish what we started." They sat in silence after that, but it was comfortable, the kind of quiet that comes when two people understand each other without needing words. The next morning, Caleb left before dawn. He rode east first, toward a ranch owned by a man named Cooper, who had lost his barn to a suspicious fire 6 months earlier. Then south to the Bridger place, where young Tom Bridger was trying to hold on to land his father had died working. At each stop, Caleb told the same story. Crane was coming for all of them eventually. They could fight alone and die alone, or they could stand together, and maybe, just maybe, they could win. Some turned him away. Fear had dug its roots too deep. But others listened. Tom Bridger, whose hands still bore calluses from digging his father's grave. Helen Cooper, who ran the cafe in town and remembered when redemption had been a decent place. A blacksmith named Wade, who had watched Crane's men beat his brother and had never forgotten. By the time the sun set, Caleb had commitments from 8 people. Not fighters, most of them, but people who were tired of being afraid. Back at Black Mesa, Aita spent the day teaching Mary to load and fire the Winchester. The girl learned quickly, her small size actually an advantage when it came to steadying the rifle. By evening, she could hit targets at 50 yards. They also worked on hand signals. If Mary could not speak, she needed other ways to communicate in a fight. Point for direction, fist for stop, open palm for danger. Simple but effective. That night, as they prepared dinner, Mary wrote on her slate, "Why are you doing this? You could leave. Be safe." Aita read the message and looked at the girl for a long moment before answering. "When I was young, my village was attacked. I hid while soldiers killed everyone I loved. I survived, but I was not brave. I was just small and quiet." She paused, stirring the pot on the stove. "I told myself for years that surviving was enough, that living was the same as being alive. But it is not. Being alive means choosing to stand for something, even if it is dangerous, even if it is hard." Mary wiped tears from her eyes and wrote, "I want to be alive too." "Then you will be." Caleb returned the next afternoon with news. The 8 people he had recruited would come to Black Mesa the following evening, the night before Crane's planned attack. They would have maybe 12 hours to prepare, to turn the ranch into something defensible. "It's not much," Caleb admitted as they discussed strategy. "Most of them have never been in a real fight, but they're motivated, and sometimes that matters more than experience." "What about Sam?" Aita asked. "He'll come. Says he's got medicine supplies ready for after. Smart man, assuming some of us will need patching up." That night, they went over every inch of the ranch, identifying weak points and strong positions. The barn had a loft with clear sightlines. The house had thick walls and multiple exits. The creek provided water if they were pinned down. Caleb sketched a rough map by lamplight. "Crane's men will come from the north road, most likely. That's the only approach that doesn't require crossing the creek. We put shooters in the barn loft, 2 more on the house roof. Rest stay inside the house with loaded weapons." "What about fire?" Aita asked. "If they burn us out?" "We dig trenches, fill them with water from the creek. Won't stop a determined fire, but it'll slow it down. Give us time to respond." Mary wrote on her slate, "What if they bring more than 7 men?" It was a question neither Caleb nor Aita wanted to answer, but it hung in the air like smoke. "Then we adapt," Caleb said finally. "War never goes according to plan. You prepare for what you can, and improvise the rest." The next day passed in a blur of activity. The 8 recruits arrived as promised, looking nervous but determined. Tom Bridger, barely 20, with his father's rifle. Helen Cooper, steel in her spine despite her gray hair. Wade, the blacksmith, arms like tree trunks. 5 others, each carrying their own reasons for being there. Caleb organized them into groups, shooters and runners, people to carry ammunition and water, people to watch different approaches. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who had commanded before, and the civilians responded to it, their fear transforming into purpose. Aita worked with the women, showing them how to reload quickly, how to stay low, how to move between positions without exposing themselves. She taught with patience, remembering her own learning curve with the Winchester. Sam arrived near dusk, carrying 2 bags of medical supplies. He set up a makeshift field hospital in the main room of the house, laying out bandages, laudanum, scissors, and needles for stitching wounds. "Hope we don't need all this," Sam said, "but hope's not a strategy." As darkness fell, they gathered in the house. 15 people, united by fear and fragile courage. Caleb stood before them, hat in hand. "I want to thank you all for coming. I know what you're risking. Some of you have families, businesses, lives that could be destroyed if this goes wrong. But if we don't stand now, Crane will pick us off one by one. He'll take everything we've built and leave us with nothing but dust and regret." He paused, looking at each face in turn. "Tomorrow, men with guns will come to this ranch. They'll come to kill me and anyone who stands with me. They'll come because Zeke Crane thinks he owns this land and everyone on it. But he's wrong. This land belongs to the people who work it, to the people who love it, to the people willing to fight for it." Tom Bridger spoke up, his voice cracking slightly. "What if we lose?" "Then we lose standing up," Caleb said simply. "And that's worth something." Aita stepped forward. The room quieted. Most of these people had never heard her speak at length. "I am Apache," she said, her accent thick, but her words clear. "My people have fought for this land longer than any of you have lived. We lost. The soldiers came and took everything. But before we lost, we fought. We stood for our homes, our families, our right to exist. That fight mattered. Even in defeat, it mattered." She looked around the room, meeting eyes that had once refused to see her. "You have a choice tomorrow. You can fight and maybe die, or you can kneel and definitely lose everything that makes you human. I have already made my choice. I will not kneel again, not for Crane, not for anyone." The room was silent. Then Helen Cooper stood. "I'm with you." Tom Bridger rose. "Me too." One by one, they all stood. Wade, Sam, the others whose names Caleb was still learning. A ragged collection of frightened, brave, ordinary people who had decided that enough was enough. Mary, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, stood last. She held up her slate. "For all of us who were afraid, no more." That night they took shifts keeping watch. 2 awake at all times, scanning the darkness for movement, for the first sign of what was coming. Caleb found Aita on the porch during his watch shift. She stood at the railing, looking toward the northern ridge where, tomorrow, violence would come riding. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too much to think about." He stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Aita, if things go badly tomorrow, do not say it. We will survive. We have to. Still, I want you to know, these past weeks, having you here, watching you become who you are, it's reminded me what living feels like. Not just surviving, actually living." Aita turned to face him. In the moonlight, her eyes were dark pools. "You gave me a home when I had none." They stood like that for a long moment, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of their separate tragedies and built something new from the broken pieces. "We should rest," Caleb said finally. "Tomorrow will be long." "Yes, tomorrow will be long." But neither of them moved. They stayed on that porch, watching stars wheel overhead, knowing that when dawn came, everything would change. In the distance, unheard and unseen, 7 riders made camp on the northern ridge. They cleaned their guns and sharpened their knives. They laughed and drank and told stories of previous jobs, previous burnings, previous screams. They did not know that the people they planned to terrorize had become something else during the long night of preparation, had transformed from victims into defenders, from the hunted into the hunters. The stage was set. The players were in position. And come morning, redemption would learn what happens when ordinary people decide they have had enough of extraordinary cruelty. Dawn came soft and pink, painting the eastern sky in shades that promised heat. Caleb stood on the porch, Winchester in hand, watching the northern ridge. Beside him, Aita held her rifle with the easy confidence of someone who had spent the night preparing for violence. Inside the house, the others stirred. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen where Helen Cooper worked quietly, understanding that a good breakfast might be the last normal thing any of them experienced for a while. Tom Bridger emerged from the barn, wiping sleep from his eyes. He had taken the last watch shift, scanning the darkness for movement that never came. "Nothing," he reported. "Not even a coyote." "They will wait for full light," Aita said. "Want to see their targets clearly." Caleb nodded agreement. Crane's men were professionals, not amateurs who charged in blindly. They would come when visibility was good, and their advantage was maximum. Sam Hutchins appeared in the doorway, medical bag already organized. "Everyone eat something. Don't care if you're nervous. Your bodies need fuel." They gathered in the main room, 15 people eating in near silence. Mary sat close to Aita, her slate board on her lap, fingers drumming nervously against the wood. Wade the blacksmith ate methodically, fueling his large frame. The others picked at their food, appetites destroyed by anticipation. "Positions," Caleb said when breakfast was finished. "Tom, Wade, you're in the barn loft. Helen, Mrs. Morrison, you're on the roof. Everyone else inside except Aita and me on the porch. Remember, do not fire until they make the first move. I want witnesses to see who started this." "What if they just burn us out from a distance?" one of the farmers asked, voice shaking. "Then we put out the fires and return fire. But I don't think that's Crane's play. He wants this clean, wants to claim self-defense. So he'll come close, make threats, try to provoke us. That's when we hold steady." They moved to their positions. The barn loft afforded a clear view of the northern approach. The roof gave height advantage. The house provided solid walls and multiple firing angles. Aita checked Mary's position by the kitchen window, weapon loaded and ready. The girl's hands were steady, despite the fear in her eyes. "You do not have to shoot," Aita told her quietly. "You can just watch. Call out positions." Mary shook her head and wrote on her slate, "I can do this." "I know you can, but only if you must." The sun climbed higher. 9 o'clock became 10. Tension stretched like wire pulled too tight. Every sound made people jump. A bird landing on the roof. The wind rattling a loose board. The creak of someone shifting weight. Then Tom called down from the barn, "Riders, 7 of them. Coming slow." Caleb raised binoculars borrowed from Sam. 7 men on horseback, spread in a loose line, rifles visible. They rode with the casual arrogance of people who expected no real resistance. At the center rode a man Caleb recognized even from a distance. Jack Reeves, a hired gun who had worked the territory for years. Beside him, Luther Hicks, Mary's stepfather, a thick man with mean eyes. The other 5 were unknowns, but they carried themselves like men familiar with violence. "Nobody fires," Caleb called out. "Let them come." The riders stopped 50 yards from the house, just outside effective rifle range. Reeves dismounted and walked forward alone, hands visible but close to his gun belt. "Caleb Morrow," Reeves called out. His voice carried easily across the distance. "Been a long time." "Not long enough, Jack. What do you want?" Reeves' eyes moved past Caleb to where Aita stood. His expression shifted, recognition flickering. "Well, I'll be damned. Shadow Hawk," he smiled coldly. "Heard you were dead. Army said you disappeared after Fort Apache." Caleb glanced at Aita. She stood perfectly still, but her knuckles were white on the rifle. "That's not my name anymore," Aita said quietly. "No?" Reeves laughed. "Apache woman who could track a spider across stone? Shoot a man through the eye at 200 yards. They said you were the best scout the cavalry ever had, until you just vanished." His smile widened. "Now I know where you went. Shacking up with a washed-up ranger." "Enough talk," Caleb said, his voice hard. "State your business, or leave." Reeves' amusement faded. "Just delivering a message from Mr. Crane. Just delivering a message from Mr. Crane. He's willing to be reasonable. Offers you $2,000 for this property. That's generous, considering." "Considering what?" "Considering the alternative." Reeves smiled, cold as January. "You got 1 hour to accept. After that, things get unpleasant." "Here's my counteroffer," Caleb said, voice hard as stone. "You turn those horses around and ride back to Crane. Tell him Black Mesa isn't for sale. Not for 2,000, not for 20. Tell him if he wants a war, he just found one." Reeves' smile faded. "You got women and civilians in there, Morrow. Don't be stupid." "The only stupid thing would be believing Crane will leave us alone if we sell. We know his game. We know about the railroad. We know about the families he's destroyed. So you can take your offer and your threats and get off my land." Luther Hicks called out from behind Reeves, "I know you got my stepdaughter in there. That's kidnapping, Morrow. Send her out, and maybe we'll forget about this." Aita stepped forward before Caleb could respond. Her voice rang clear and strong. "Mary stays. She is under protection now. Your protection is what she needed saving from." Luther's face went purple with rage. "That mousy bitch belongs to me. I'll drag her out by her hair and teach her what happens to runaways." "You will try," Aita said simply. The challenge hung in the air. Luther started forward, hand on his gun, but Reeves grabbed his arm. "Not yet," Reeves muttered. Then louder, "Last chance, Morrow. 1 hour. After that, we start burning." They retreated to their horses and rode back beyond rifle range, settling in to wait. Inside the house, Sam checked his pocket watch. 11:15. So they'll move at noon. "Unless they move sooner," Wade said from the barn loft. "Never trust a man like Reeves to keep his word." The hour crawled past like a wounded animal. Sweat soaked through shirts despite the morning coolness. Hands cramped from gripping weapons too tightly. Eyes strained from watching the distant riders who sat motionless, waiting. At noon exactly, the riders began to move, but not toward the house. They split into 3 groups. 2 men rode east toward the barn, 2 west toward the creek. Reeves and the remaining 2 came straight at the house. "They're flanking," Tom called down. "Going for the barn." "Let them come closer," Caleb ordered. "Wait for my signal." The eastern riders reached the barn and dismounted. One pulled out a torch. The other kept his rifle ready, scanning for threats. "Now," Caleb shouted. Tom and Wade fired simultaneously from the loft. The man with the torch went down, clutching his leg. The other dove for cover behind a water trough. The western riders opened fire on the house. Bullets thudded into timber walls. Helen and Mrs. Morrison returned fire from the roof, their shots wild, but enough to make the attackers seek cover. Reeves and his 2 companions charged the porch. They fired as they came, bullets shattering windows and splintering wood. Caleb and Aita dropped behind the railing, firing back. One rider went down, hoarse, screaming. The other 2 veered off, circling. "They are trying to surround us," Aita said. "Then we make them pay for every inch." Caleb reloaded, hands moving with practiced speed. The battle dissolved into chaos. Gunfire echoed across the valley. Smoke from burning powder hazed the air. Someone screamed, though whether attacker or defender was impossible to tell. Luther Hicks broke from cover and ran toward the house, bellowing Mary's name. He fired wildly, more rage than aim. Mary appeared at the kitchen window, rifle raised. She fired once. The shot went wide, but Luther dove for cover behind a wagon. "Stay down!" Aita shouted. But Mary had already ducked back inside. The man Wade had shot crawled toward his horse, leaving a blood trail. Tom fired again, kicking up dirt inches from the man's hand. The man froze, then put his hands up in surrender. "We got one!" Tom called. But the victory was short-lived. The western riders had reached the creek and were using the bank as cover. Their fire was methodical now, targeting specific windows, trying to pin the defenders down. Caleb made a decision. "Aita, you're in command here. I'm going around back, flank them from the creek side." "Too dangerous." "Everything's dangerous, but if we let them dig in, we're finished." He gripped her shoulder briefly. "Keep everyone alive. I'll be back." Before she could argue, he was gone, slipping out the back door and into the maze of corrals and outbuildings. Aita moved through the house, checking positions. Sam was treating a minor wound on one of the farmers, a graze across the forearm. The man was pale but steady. Everyone else remained in position, firing when they had targets, conserving ammunition when they didn't. She found Mary reloading by the kitchen window, hands shaking but determined. "You did well," Aita said. "Your shot made him think twice." Mary wrote quickly, "I wanted to kill him. Is that wrong?" "No, it is honest." Aita checked the window. Luther was still behind the wagon, trapped. "But killing changes you. Even when it is right, it changes you. Be sure you are ready for that change." Outside, Caleb reached the creek. The 2 western riders were focused on the house, unaware of his approach. He came up behind them, Winchester ready. "Drop your weapons." Both men spun. One was smart enough to obey. The other went for his gun. Caleb shot him through the shoulder, spinning him around. The man collapsed, screaming. "I said drop them," Caleb repeated to the first man, who hastily threw down his rifle. "We were just following orders," the man stammered. "Bad excuse. On your belly, hands behind your head." With the western flank neutralized, the balance shifted. Reeves, seeing his plan falling apart, made his own desperate move. He and his remaining companion charged the house again, this time on foot, using the smoke and confusion for cover. They reached the porch. Reeves kicked in the front door, gun blazing. Helen screamed from somewhere inside. Sam shouted orders. Everything became noise and violence and the smell of blood. Aita met Reeves in the main room. They fired simultaneously. Both missed at close range, the chaos throwing off their aim. Reeves lunged forward, trying to close the distance where his size would be an advantage. But Aita had been trained by warriors who understood that size meant nothing if you knew where to strike. She sidestepped, brought the rifle stock up hard into Reeves's jaw. Bone cracked. He staggered. She hit him again, this time in the temple. He went down hard and did not get up. The second man, seeing Reeves fall, tried to retreat. Tom appeared in the doorway, blocking his path. The man raised his hands. "I yield! Don't shoot!" Outside, Luther Hicks saw it all falling apart. His men were down or captured. The house still stood. His stepdaughter had shot at him. Everything Crane had promised, all the easy money for an easy job, had turned into a nightmare. He made one final, desperate decision. If he couldn't have Mary, nobody would. He pulled out a stick of dynamite, the kind miners used. Lit the fuse. "You want her so bad?" he screamed. "Then burn with her!" He hurled the dynamite toward the house. It arced through the air, fuse sputtering. Mary saw it coming. Without thinking, without fear, she ran from the house, grabbed the dynamite mid-air, turned, threw it back. The timing was perfect and terrible. The dynamite landed at Luther's feet just as he realized what was happening. His eyes went wide. The explosion was enormous. It shattered the wagon Luther had been hiding behind. It blew out windows in the house. The sound rolled across the valley like thunder. When the smoke cleared, Luther Hicks was gone, just pieces and blood, and the memory of a man who had valued control more than humanity. Mary stood in the yard, eyes wide with shock. Aita ran to her, pulled her close. "You saved us," Aita whispered. "You were so brave." Mary clung to her, and finally, for the first time since they had met, she made a sound, a sob, raw and painful, the voice of someone who had been silent for too long. Caleb emerged from behind the house, prisoners in tow. He took in the scene, the bodies, the blood, the survivors standing shell-shocked and victorious. "It's over," he said. "We won." But even as he spoke, riders appeared on the southern ridge. For a moment, everyone tensed, reaching for weapons. Then Sam laughed, relief making him giddy. "That's not Crane's men. That's Judge Hayes. I sent word to him yesterday. He came." Indeed, the riders wore no outlaw clothes, but rather the uniforms of territorial marshals. At their head rode a distinguished man in his 60s, gray beard neatly trimmed, badge catching the sun. Judge Cornelius Hayes surveyed the battlefield with experienced eyes. He rode forward slowly, hands visible and empty. "Caleb Morrow? That's me. I'm Judge Hayes from Tucson. Dr. Hutchins sent word that Zeke Crane was planning violence. Looks like he was right." Hayes gestured to his marshals. "Secure the prisoners. Get statements from everyone. And someone find out who that used to be." He pointed at what remained of Luther. Over the next 2 hours, the marshals worked efficiently. They tended wounds, took statements, examined evidence. The prisoners talked freely, eager to trade information for leniency. They confirmed everything. Crane had ordered the attack. Sheriff Pike had looked the other way. It was all part of a scheme to clear land for the railroad. Hayes listened to it all, his expression growing darker. Finally, he turned to his lead marshal. "Ride to redemption. Arrest Zeke Crane and Luther Pike on charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, and land fraud. If they resist, you are authorized to use necessary force." The marshal nodded and rode off with 3 others. Hayes approached Caleb and Aida, who stood together on the porch, exhausted but alive. "You've done the territory a service," Hayes said. "Crane's been operating beyond the law for too long. But he was smart, covered his tracks. Today, you made him desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. And his men in there?" He jerked his thumb at the captured prisoners. "They're singing like canaries. We have enough evidence now to put Crane away for 20 years. "What about the people who sold their land?" Caleb asked. "The families he destroyed?" "Legally, it's complicated. But I'll see what can be done. At minimum, we can prevent the railroad from profiting off stolen land." Hayes paused. "There's something else. Redemption needs a new sheriff. Pike will be joining Crane in prison. I'm authorized to offer temporary commissions to qualified candidates." He looked at Caleb meaningfully. Caleb shook his head. "I'm done wearing badges, Judge, but I appreciate the thought." "Fair enough. The offer stands if you change your mind." Hayes tipped his hat to Aida. "Ma'am, I've heard some of your story. What was done to you in that town was shameful. I hope today begins to balance those scales." Aida nodded, but said nothing. Justice delivered by outsiders was better than no justice at all, but it felt hollow compared to the battle they had just survived. As the marshals prepared to leave, taking prisoners with them, Sam gathered the civilians who had fought. "You were all magnificent," he said. "Farmers and shopkeepers stood against professional killers and won. That's a story worth telling." Tom Bridger, bandage on his arm but grinning, raised his canteen. "To Black Mesa, and to not backing down." They drank, these ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. As evening approached and the last of the marshals rode away, Caleb and Aida stood together surveying the damage. Bullet holes in the walls, broken windows, blood staining the dirt. It would take weeks to repair everything, but they had won. Mary approached, still close to Aida. She wrote on her slate, "What happens now?" Aida looked at Caleb, then back at Mary. "Now we rebuild. We make this place into a real home, for all of us." "Together," Caleb added. Mary smiled, a real smile, the first any of them had seen from her. She wrote again, "I would like that." That night they gathered on the porch, the survivors of Black Mesa. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, repairs, questions, the slow process of healing both structures and souls. But tonight, they simply sat together, watching stars emerge, grateful to be alive, grateful to have found courage they did not know they possessed. In redemption, Zeke Crane was arrested without incident. Sheriff Pike tried to run, but made it only 3 miles before being captured. The town watched in stunned silence as the men who had terrorized them for so long were led away in chains. And on the porch of Black Mesa Ranch, Aida, Caleb, and Mary sat in comfortable silence, 3 people bound by shared courage, no longer victims, but survivors who had claimed their right to exist. A family forged in fire. 3 days after the battle, redemption woke to a different world. The saloon where Crane had held court sat empty, its doors locked by federal order. The sheriff's office wore a temporary sign, "Under new management, Deputy Marshal assigned." But change came slowly to a town that had learned to accept cruelty as normal. Caleb rode into town that morning with Aida beside him and Mary sitting behind her. They came not for supplies, but for something more important: to be seen. to remind Redemption that the people it had tried to erase were still here, still standing. They tied their horses outside the general store. The street went quiet as people recognized them. Whispers rippled through the morning air like wind through dry grass. Pete Grady stood outside his butcher shop, jaw still swollen from where Caleb had hit him weeks earlier. He watched them with eyes that held equal parts fear and hate. But he did not move, did not speak. The power that had made men like Pete bold was gone, and he knew it. Inside the store, Mr. Jameson, the proprietor, stood behind his counter. He was a thin man who had always prided himself on serving everyone, as long as that everyone could pay and knew their place. "Mr. Morrow," Jameson said carefully. "Ma'am." He nodded to Aita, with a respect that had never been there before. "What can I get for you?" Caleb handed him a list. Nails, lumber, glass for windows, wire for fencing, coffee, flour, salt, whatever you've got in stock. Jameson scanned the list. "That's a large order. Must be doing repairs out at Black Mesa." "Some repairs, mostly building new things." Caleb met his eyes. "Place is going to need more room. More people coming to stay." "More—" Jameson paused. "More people like—" He gestured vaguely at Aita. "More people who need a place where they're treated like human beings," Caleb said flatly. "Indian, white, Mexican, doesn't matter. Anyone running from the kind of treatment this town used to specialize in." Jameson flushed, but nodded. "I'll get your order together. Take about an hour." They left the store and walked down the main street. Mary held tight to Aita's hand, her slate board tucked under her other arm. People stared. Some looked away quickly, ashamed. Others watched with open curiosity. Helen Cooper emerged from her cafe, wiping flour from her hands. "Aita! Mary!" She embraced them both warmly, ignoring the shocked looks from passers-by. "Come in, please. Coffee's fresh, and I made apple pie this morning." Inside the cafe, several customers sat at tables. They fell silent as Aita and Mary entered. Helen led them to a table by the window, the best spot in the house, where before she would have never seated an Apache woman. "On the house," Helen said firmly when Caleb reached for money. "After what you all did, you eat free here forever." One of the customers, an older man named Whitmore, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Cooper, I'm not sure it's appropriate to serve—" "Indians?" Helen turned on him, eyes blazing. "That what you were going to say, Jack? Because this Indian woman fought 7 armed men to protect people she barely knew. She stood in front of my house while bullets flew and never flinched. So if you have a problem eating in the same room as her, there's the door." Whitmore looked around for support, found none. Even his friends at the next table studied their coffee with sudden intensity. "No problem," Whitmore muttered. "No problem at all." Helen brought pie and coffee. As they ate, Mary wrote on her slate, "People are afraid of us now." "Not afraid," Aita said quietly. "Uncertain. They do not know how to treat us, now that we are not victims. It confuses them." "Let them be confused," Caleb said. "Better than being cruel." The door opened, and Sam Hutchins entered, carrying his medical bag. His face lit up when he saw them. "There you are. I stopped by the ranch this morning, but you'd already left." He joined them at the table. "How are the wounds healing?" "Tom's arm is good. Wade's bruises fading. Everyone else just tired." Caleb sipped his coffee. "You?" "Busy. Half the town suddenly remembers they have ailments that need treating. Amazing how being on the winning side makes a man popular." Sam's smile faded. But there's something you should know. I've been hearing talk. Not everyone's happy about how things turned out." "Who?" Ahita asked. "Reverend Grimm, for one. He's been preaching about divine judgment, how the battle was God's way of testing redemption's faith. Says the town failed by allowing heathens to triumph over Christian men." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Grimm's a fool. Crane's men weren't Christian soldiers. They were hired killers." "I know that. You know that. But Grimm has followers, people who want simple explanations for complicated things." Sam lowered his voice. "There's also the matter of the railroad. Crane's arrested, but the Southern Pacific still wants that land. They're sending representatives next week to negotiate. And there are rumors they're looking to hire new local help." "More men like Crane?" Caleb said. "Maybe. Or maybe they learned their lesson and will try legal pressure instead of violence. Either way, this isn't over." They finished their pie in thoughtful silence. Through the window, Caleb watched the town move through its daily routines. Children played in the street. Wagons rolled past. Life continued, as it always did, regardless of who suffered or triumphed. But something had changed. The fear that had hung over redemption like smoke was lifting. Not gone completely, but thinner, easier to breathe through. A young woman entered the cafe, moving hesitantly. She wore a bonnet pulled low and kept her eyes down. Helen greeted her warmly, but the woman barely responded, just ordered coffee to go. As she waited, Mary tugged on Itita's sleeve and pointed. The woman's wrists bore fading bruises, visible when her sleeves shifted. Itita stood and approached her. The woman flinched. "I am sorry," Itita said gently. "I do not mean to frighten you, but I see your wrists. I have had such marks. I know what they mean." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "It's nothing. I'm clumsy, that's all." "I was clumsy too, for many years." Itita pulled back her own sleeve, showing scars. "Until I learned that being clumsy was not my fault. It was his." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Itita's voice remained soft but firm. "You know exactly, and you know it will happen again and again, until one day the bruises do not fade." The woman's face crumpled. She sobbed once, then caught herself looking around frantically to see who was watching. "There is a place," Aita said quietly, "a ranch called Black Mesa, 10 miles south. If you need to leave, you can come there. No questions, no judgment, just safety." "My husband would kill me." "Then you come anyway. We have faced killers before. We can face one more." Helen brought the woman's coffee. "She's telling the truth, dear. Black Mesa is safe. I've seen it myself." The woman took her coffee with shaking hands and fled. But at the door, she paused and looked back. Just for a moment, hope flickered in her eyes before fear smothered it again. "That's the third one this week," Helen said after she left. "Women hearing what you did, Aita. Hearing that someone stood up and survived. It's giving them ideas." "Good," Aita said. "Ideas are where change begins." They collected their supplies and prepared to leave. As they loaded the wagon, a commotion erupted down the street. A crowd gathered near the church, voices raised in argument. Caleb, Aita, and Sam walked over to investigate. At the center of the crowd stood Reverend Grimm, red-faced and sweating despite the morning coolness. Facing him was Tom Bridger, young but standing tall. "You're a hypocrite," Tom was saying, voice shaking but determined. "You preach about loving thy neighbor while defending men who murdered and stole." You call yourself a man of God, but you worship power, not divinity." "How dare you speak to me this way?" Grimm sputtered. "I am ordained by the church, appointed by God himself." "Then God made a mistake," Tom shot back, "because you're no shepherd. You're a wolf in robes." The crowd murmured, some in agreement, others scandalized. Grimm's face went from red to purple. "This town will not stand for such blasphemy. I will see you driven out, boy. You and everyone who supported that massacre at Black Mesa." "Massacre?" Sam Hutchins pushed through the crowd. "Is that what you're calling it? 7 armed men attacking civilians in their home, and you call the defense a massacre? They harbored an Indian woman. They defied the natural order." "The natural order," Sam said, his voice cold with contempt, "is that human beings deserve dignity and safety, something you seem to have forgotten in your zeal to serve powerful men." "I serve God." "You serve yourself." Sam turned to address the crowd. "I've lived in this town 40 years, delivered most of your children, buried many of your parents, and in all that time, I've watched good people stay silent while bad people did terrible things. We told ourselves it wasn't our business, that we couldn't make a difference, that speaking up would only make things worse." He paused, letting the words sink in. But then a woman, who had every reason to give up, decided to stand. And a man who could have turned away chose to help. And when violence came to their door, they didn't run. They fought. And you know what? We won. Not Crane, not Pike, not the hired killers. Us. The ordinary people everyone thought were too weak or scared to matter. The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. So Reverend Grimm can call it whatever he wants. He can preach about natural order and divine judgment. But I was there. I saw farmers and shopkeepers face down professional gunmen. I saw an Apache woman and a former ranger defend not just themselves, but an entire community. And I saw cowards like Crane run when finally confronted by courage. Sam looked at Grimm directly. "You want to drive out the people who saved this town? Good luck. Because I think you'll find that redemption is tired of men like you telling us what to think and who to hate." For a long moment, Grimm stared at Sam, then at the crowd. He saw the expressions there, the way people looked at him now. Not with reverence, but with judgment. His power, built on fear and complicity, was crumbling. "This isn't over," Grimm said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. He pushed through the crowd and disappeared into the church, slamming the door behind him. Tom approached Sam and shook his hand. "Thank you. I didn't think anyone would back me up." "You spoke the truth. That's always worth backing up." Sam clapped him on the shoulder. "Besides, I'm too old to be scared of blowhards in collars." As they walked back to the wagon, Caleb said quietly, "That was quite a speech." "Been building for 40 years, Sam smiled. Felt good to finally let it out. They rode back to Black Mesa in the afternoon heat. Mary dozed against Aita's back, exhausted by the morning's events. The wagon rattled over familiar ruts, laden with supplies for rebuilding. As they crested the final hill and the ranch came into view, Caleb felt something settle in his chest. This place, which had been a refuge from grief, was becoming something more. A beacon, a symbol of what was possible when people chose courage over comfort. At the house, Wade was working on the roof, replacing shingles damaged in the fight. He waved as they approached. Tom's younger sister, who had come to help with cooking, emerged from the kitchen with a pail of water. The woman from the cafe 3 days ago, who had finally fled her husband, sat on the porch mending clothes. Black Mesa was becoming what Aita had envisioned, a home for people who needed one. That evening, as the sun painted the western sky in shades of orange and gold, they gathered for dinner. 8 people now called Black Mesa home, with more likely to come. The table Caleb had eaten at alone for 3 years was crowded and loud and full of life. After the meal, Aita found Mary in the kitchen, washing dishes. The girl worked with quiet efficiency, lost in thought. "You're quiet tonight," Aita said, picking up a towel to dry. Mary paused, then reached for her slate. "I am thinking that I never believed I could be happy, that happiness was for other people, people who were whole and undamaged. And now?" Mary erased and wrote again. "Now I think maybe damaged people can be happy too. Maybe being broken and being whole are not opposites. Maybe they can exist together." Aita set down the towel and embraced her. "You are very wise for 17. Inside, Caleb stood at the window watching them. Sam joined him, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He offered one to Caleb. "You've built something good here," Sam said. "We've built something good. Couldn't have done it without you, without all of them." "So what's next?" "The railroad representatives come next week. They'll want answers." Caleb sipped his coffee, thinking. "Then we give them answers. We tell them Black Mesa isn't for sale, that this land belongs to the people who work it, who bleed for it, who make it mean something more than property lines on a map. They won't like that. Don't care what they like. Caring what powerful people think is how we got Crane in the first place." Caleb turned from the window. "Besides, we're not alone anymore. There are 8 of us here, and more in town who stood with us. That's the beginning of something bigger than one ranch." "A movement?" Sam raised an eyebrow. "A community. People looking out for each other instead of just themselves. Revolutionary concept in the Arizona Territory." Sam laughed. "You always were an optimist, even when you pretended not to be." They drank their coffee in comfortable silence. 2 old men watching younger people build the future on the foundation of their courage. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain. The valley stretched peaceful in the darkness, unchanged by human drama, indifferent to questions of justice and dignity and belonging. But for the people of Black Mesa, those questions mattered. They were the difference between merely surviving and actually living, between existing and having purpose, between being alone and being part of something larger than themselves. The night deepened. Stars blazed overhead in their millions. And in a small ranch in the Arizona Territory, people who had every reason to give up chose instead to hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the railroad, the lingering resentment of people like Grimm, the slow, grinding work of changing minds and hearts. But tonight, they were together. They were safe. They had won. And that, for now, was enough. The railroad representatives arrived on a Tuesday morning, 6 days after Reverend Grimm's public humiliation. 3 men in expensive suits rode in a polished carriage, their driver a 4th man who looked more bodyguard than servant. Caleb watched them approach from the porch of Black Mesa, Winchester leaning against the railing within easy reach. Beside him, Aita stood with her arms crossed, eyes tracking the carriage's progress down the valley road. "They bring lawyers instead of guns," she observed. "Lawyers can be more dangerous," Caleb replied. "Bullets you can see coming." The carriage stopped 30 yards from the house, maintaining a respectful distance. The 3 men climbed out, brushing dust from their clothes. The eldest, a silver-haired man with a neat beard, stepped forward. Mr. Morrow? I'm Douglas Whitman, Land Acquisition Manager for the Southern Pacific Railroad. These are my associates, Mr. Chen and Mr. Vasquez. We'd like to discuss a business proposition, if you have time. Caleb remained on the porch. I have time. Don't know if I have interest, but I'll listen. Whitman smiled, the practiced expression of a man who negotiated for a living. May we approach? Stay where you are. You can talk from there just fine. The smile flickered but held. Very well. Mr. Morrow, I'll be direct. The Southern Pacific is laying track through this region. The route we've surveyed runs through the southern portion of your property. We're prepared to offer fair compensation for an easement, or if you prefer, to purchase the entire ranch at considerably above market value. How much above market? $5,000. It was a fortune. More money than most men in the territory would see in a lifetime. Enough to buy a new ranch twice the size somewhere else, with money left over. No, Caleb said. Whitman blinked. Perhaps you didn't hear me clearly. 5,000. I heard you fine. Answer's still no. The man to Whitman's right, Chen, spoke up. His accent was California coastal, educated. Mr. Morrow, perhaps you're not aware of the legal complexities. The railroad has considerable influence with the territorial government. Eminent domain proceedings can be unpleasant. Are you threatening me? Caleb's voice went flat. Not at all, Whitman interjected quickly. Mr. Chen is simply explaining reality. We'd prefer to reach an amicable agreement, but the railroad is coming through this valley one way or another. The only question is whether you profit from it or fight a losing battle. Aita stepped forward. You say the railroad is coming no matter what. Why do you bother asking? Why not just take? Whitman turned his attention to her, and something flickered in his eyes. Not quite surprise, but recalibration. And you are? I am Aita Morrow. This is my home, too. I see. Whitman's tone shifted, became more careful. Mrs. Morrow, your husband is technically correct that we cannot simply take the land without due process. However, due process can be expensive and time-consuming for everyone involved. We're hoping to avoid that. Because you already tried the other way, Caleb said. Crane and his hired guns. That didn't work out so well for you. The three men exchanged glances. Vasquez, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. We want to be clear that the Southern Pacific had no knowledge of Mr. Crane's activities. He was operating independently, without company sanction. That's horseshit, and we both know it, Caleb said bluntly. Crane was buying land cheap, using violence and intimidation, then selling it to you at markup. You knew exactly what he was doing. You just didn't care, as long as you got your right of way. Whitman's professional smile vanished. These are serious accusations, Mr. Morrow. Do you have proof? Judge Hayes has proof. Sworn statements from Crane's men. Documents showing payments from railroad accounts to shell companies Crane controlled. It's all in territorial court records now. Public information. The silence that followed was heavy. The driver's hand moved closer to his coat, but Whitman shook his head slightly, and the hand stopped. Let me propose a compromise, Whitman said finally. We survey an alternate route that bypasses your property entirely. It will cost the company more, but it avoids conflict. In exchange, you agree not to testify in any proceedings against the railroad regarding Mr. Crane's activities. So you want me to forget about the families Crane destroyed? The people he killed or drove off their land? We're willing to establish a compensation fund for those affected, administered by an independent trustee, perhaps Judge Hayes himself. Everyone gets something. Everyone moves forward. Caleb looked at Aita. She met his eyes and gave the smallest shake of her head. No deal, Caleb said. You want an alternate route. Fine. Survey wherever you want, as long as it's not on my land. But I'm not silencing myself or anyone else about what happened. The people deserve to know what kind of company they're dealing with. Whitman's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. The Southern Pacific has resources you can't imagine. We can make your life very difficult. You mean more difficult than 7 armed men attacking my home? More difficult than watching my neighbors terrorized and murdered? Caleb picked up the Winchester, not aiming it but making its presence known. I've seen your worst. It didn't work. So unless you plan to start shooting right here, I suggest you get back in that fancy carriage and tell your bosses that Black Mesa isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever. Whitman stared at him for a long moment, then turned to his associates. They had a brief, whispered conference. Finally, Whitman faced Caleb again. We'll be in touch, Mr. Morrow. This conversation isn't over. Yes, it is. Now get off my land. They climbed back into the carriage. As it rolled away, the driver looked back once, his eyes cold and evaluating. The kind of look a man gives something he's been ordered to remember. When they were gone, Sam emerged from inside the house where he had been watching through a window. That went well, he said dryly. Could have gone worse. They could have started shooting. They still might. Different kind of shooting, though. Legal instead of literal. Sam joined them on the porch. Eminent domain is real, Caleb. If they push it, they might win. Then we make it as painful as possible. Drag it through every court, appeal every decision, make so much noise that it becomes cheaper to go around us than through us. Aita touched his arm. This is a long fight. Years, maybe. Are you prepared for that? Caleb looked at the ranch, at the valley spreading green and gold before them, at the house that had become home to people who had nowhere else to go. Yes, he said simply. I'm prepared. That afternoon they held a meeting in the main room of the house. All the residents of Black Mesa gathered, along with Tom Bridger, Helen Cooper, and several others from town who had fought in the battle. Caleb explained the railroad's offer and his refusal. When he finished, Wade spoke up. $5,000 is a lot of money. You sure about turning it down? I'm sure, but I'm not the only one with a stake in this. Black Mesa is home to all of you now, too. If you think I should take the money, say so. They looked at each other. Finally, the woman who had fled her abusive husband, a former teacher named Margaret, raised her hand. Where would we go? She asked quietly. If you sold, where would people like us go? There aren't many places that would take in an Apache woman and a white man, a mute girl and a battered wife, all under one roof. Most towns would run us out, or worse. She's right, Tom said. Black Mesa isn't just a ranch anymore. It's a symbol. Proof that people who are different can stand together, can protect each other, can win against folks who want them erased. Mary wrote on her slate and held it up. This is the first place I ever felt safe. That is worth more than $5,000. Others nodded agreement. One by one, they spoke or signed their support. Not because they were being pressured, but because they understood what would be lost if Black Mesa fell. Then we fight, Caleb said when everyone had spoken. But fighting means sacrifice. The railroad will make trouble. Legal fees, harassment, maybe even another attack. Things might get harder before they get better. Anyone wants to leave, no judgment. But if you stay knowing what's coming. No one moved toward the door. Helen stood. I'm not living here, but I'm part of this fight too. The railroad gets Black Mesa. They'll control half the town. They'll own the land, which means they'll own the leases, which means they'll own the businesses. Give them that power, and Redemption becomes a company town. I'm not letting that happen without a fight. Neither am I, Sam added. I'm too old to be scared of corporations. Already sent letters to newspapers in Tucson and Phoenix. The Southern Pacific might have money and lawyers, but we've got something better. We've got a story people want to hear. Over the next week, Sam's strategy bore fruit. A reporter from the Arizona Citizen arrived, a young woman named Elizabeth Garrett, who took extensive notes and asked sharp questions. She interviewed everyone at Black Mesa, took photographs of the battle damage still visible on the buildings, and left promising to write a comprehensive account. The article appeared 3 days later under the headline, "Apache Woman and Texas Ranger Defend Home Against Corporate Violence." It detailed Crane's conspiracy, the battle at Black Mesa, and the railroad's current pressure campaign. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Letters poured in from across the territory, some supporting, some condemning, but all paying attention. Other newspapers picked up the story. Within 2 weeks, Black Mesa had become known throughout Arizona and beyond. The attention brought both help and trouble. Help arrived in the form of a lawyer from San Francisco named Abraham Colfax, who specialized in fighting corporate land grabs. He was a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and a briefcase full of legal precedents. "I work for percentage, not fee," he explained when he arrived. "If we win, I take 20% of whatever settlement or compensation we get. If we lose, I get nothing. Sound fair?" "Why would you work those terms?" Caleb asked suspiciously. "Because I hate bullies, and corporations are the biggest bullies there are. Also because this case is exactly the kind of publicity I need. Win or lose, every farmer and rancher in the West will know my name." Colfax smiled. "Idealism and self-interest can coexist, Mr. Morrow." Trouble came in subtler forms. Supplies ordered from Redemption arrived late, or not at all. Fences were cut during the night, letting cattle wander. The new deputy marshal, a federal appointee named Carson, seemed perpetually unavailable when complaints were filed. And then there were the visitors. They came 1 or 2 at a time, usually at dusk. Men and women, sometimes families, always desperate. Word had spread that Black Mesa was a place that took in strays, that didn't ask too many questions, that protected those who needed protecting. Caleb tried to help everyone, but resources stretched thin. The ranch could only support so many people. Food, water, space, all had limits. One evening, a family of 5 arrived. Mexican, fled from violence south of the border. The father had been a school teacher until the wrong people decided he was teaching the wrong things. They had walked for 2 weeks to reach Black Mesa. Caleb looked at their exhausted faces, at the children who swayed on their feet from hunger and fatigue, and made a decision. "We can't keep everyone," he told IT after settling the family in the barn for the night. "We're becoming a refuge for the entire territory. That's not sustainable." "Then what do we do? Turn them away?" "No, but we need a different approach." Caleb paced the porch, thinking, what if Black Mesa isn't the destination? What if it's a way station? We help people, give them food and rest and direction, then send them on to places where they can actually build lives. Create a network of safe houses, friendly towns, people who will take in refugees. IT considered this. It would require trust, coordination, many people working together. So we build it. Start small, grow over time. Sam has contacts throughout the territory. Helen knows shopkeepers and farmers. We reach out, carefully, and identify who can be trusted. It is ambitious. It's necessary.
We can't save everyone by ourselves. But maybe we can create a system that saves people even when we're not directly involved. Over the following month, they put the plan into action. Sam sent letters. Helen made quiet inquiries. Tom rode to neighboring towns with carefully worded messages. Slowly, a network emerged. A ranch in Benson that would take in families fleeing domestic violence. A mine owner in Tombstone who hired workers without asking about their pasts. A convent in Tucson where nuns asked no questions but provided sanctuary. Black Mesa became the hub, the first stop for those with nowhere else to go. People arrived, stayed a few days or weeks, then moved on to new lives, facilitated by the growing underground network. But success brought scrutiny. 6 weeks after the railroad representative's visit, Deputy Marshal Carson rode out to Black Mesa with 2 territorial rangers. His expression was apologetic but firm. "Mr. Morrow, I need to ask you about some allegations. There are reports you're harboring fugitives, running some kind of illegal operation." "What kind of operation?" "Smuggling people across territory lines, aiding and abetting criminals, possibly even kidnapping." Caleb kept his face neutral. "Those are serious charges. You have proof?" "I have complaints. Husbands saying their wives were kidnapped. Business owners claiming workers disappeared after visiting here. The railroad's lawyers asking questions about your activities." "The railroad," Caleb said flatly. "There it is." Carson had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I'm just doing my job. I need to search the premises, interview your residents. Make sure everyone here is present voluntarily." "You have a warrant?" "Do I need one? Or are you going to cooperate?" Aita appeared in the doorway. Behind her, Margaret, Mary, and 3 other residents stood watching. "You want to know if we are here voluntarily?" Aita said. "Then ask us." Carson dismounted and approached. "Are you here of your own free will, ma'am?" "I am Aita Morrow. This is my home. I am here because I choose to be." Carson looked past her at the others. "And the rest of you?" One by one, they answered. Yes, they were here voluntarily. No, they had not been coerced or kidnapped. Yes, they could leave any time they wanted. Margaret stepped forward. "Deputy, my husband beat me for 7 years. When I finally fled, he told everyone I'd been kidnapped, brainwashed, corrupted by Indians and outlaws. The truth is simpler. I left because staying meant dying. Mr. Morrow gave me a place to recover, to decide what I wanted to do next. That's not kidnapping. That's charity." Carson looked at her bruises, still visible despite weeks of healing. He sighed. "I believe you, ma'am, but I still have to file a report. And I have to tell you, there's pressure coming down from high up. Territorial Governor's Office has been asking questions. Railroad's making noise. This isn't going away." "Let them make noise," Caleb said. "We're not doing anything illegal. Helping people isn't a crime." "Maybe not. But there are ways to make legal things illegal if the right people want it bad enough." Carson remounted his horse. "Watch yourself, Morrow. You've made powerful enemies." After he left, Sam voiced what everyone was thinking. They're building a case, slowly, carefully, looking for anything they can use to shut us down or discredit us. "Then we need to be more careful," Caleb said. "Document everything. Get written statements from everyone who passes through, confirming they came voluntarily. Keep records of where people go, who helps them, all of it, legal and above board." "That's a lot of paper," Tom observed. "Paper protects us. Crane operated in shadows. We operate in light. Make everything public, documented, defensible." It was exhausting work. Every person who arrived meant forms to fill out, statements to take,
letters to write. But it also meant protection. When the next complaint came, they had evidence. When accusations flew, they had proof. The railroad, frustrated by legal approaches, tried economic pressure. They bought the bank in redemption, and suddenly Black Mesa couldn't get credit. They pressured suppliers, and vendors stopped delivering to the ranch. They bought surrounding properties and controlled water rights. But for every move the railroad made, the network countered. A bank in Tucson extended credit. Suppliers in Benson took up the slack. Neighboring ranchers shared water in exchange for labor. It became a war of attrition, each side looking for weakness, probing for advantage. Through it all, Aita and Caleb kept Black Mesa running. They worked before dawn and after dusk. They solved problems, mediated disputes, made impossible decisions about who to help and how. One evening, after settling the Mexican family in the barn, Caleb found Aita in the garden pulling weeds by lamplight. She worked with fierce concentration, as if the weeds were problems she could physically remove. "You'll work yourself to exhaustion," he said, sitting on the fence rail. She straightened, wiping dirt from her hands. "We cannot do this forever. It is too much for two people, even with help." "I know." He reached down and pulled her up to sit beside him. "But I don't know how to stop. Every person who comes here is someone we might save. How do you turn that away?" "You do not turn it away. You build something bigger, something that does not depend on us alone." "Like what?" Aita looked at the house, lights glowing in windows. "What if we are not a ranch that helps people? What if we are a school that teaches people to help themselves?" "A school?" "Not for reading and writing, though that too. A school for surviving, for standing up, for knowing your rights and fighting for them. We teach people what we learned. Then they go teach others. One family becomes 10. 10 becomes 100. Caleb turned to look at her, seeing the idea take shape. "That's brilliant. We're not just saving people. We're creating a movement. A quiet movement. No violence, no revolution. Just people teaching people how to stop being victims." They sat with that thought as the stars wheeled overhead. In the house behind them, voices murmured. Somewhere in the barn, someone laughed. Life continuing, despite everything trying to crush it. "We'll need help," Caleb said. "Teachers, organizers, people who know law and politics." "We will find them. Sam knows people. Helen has contacts. The network grows." "The railroad won't like it." "The railroad does not like anything that threatens its power. But they cannot stop ideas, cannot arrest hope, cannot kill determination with lawyers and threats." Caleb squeezed her hand. "When did you become such an optimist?" "When I stopped running and started building. Optimism is easy when you have something worth protecting." They remained on the porch until the departed wagon's lights disappeared into the distance. Two people who had transformed pain into purpose, building a legacy that would outlast them both. The fight was far from over. The railroad would keep pushing. Enemies would keep circling. The work would never be truly finished. But for now, in this moment, they had won something precious. Not just survival, but meaning. Not just existence, but purpose. And in the Arizona Territory of 1883, for people who society had written off as disposable, that was a kind of victory, all its own. Winter came to the Arizona Territory, with cold winds and thin snow that melted by midday. 6 months had passed since the battle at Black Mesa, and the ranch had transformed into something neither Caleb nor Aita could have imagined that first day when he pulled her from the dust of redemption. The main house had been expanded. 2 new wings provided sleeping quarters for transient families. The barn now held a meeting room where Sam taught basic law and citizens' rights to anyone who would listen. A second well had been dug near the garden, which had grown to feed 20 people on any given day. But the most significant change was not physical. On a cold morning in late January, Caleb stood in the meeting room addressing 15 people. Not refugees this time, but volunteers. Men and women from across the territory who had heard about Black Mesa and come to learn how to build similar safe havens in their own communities. The key is documentation, Caleb explained, pointing to a stack of ledgers on the table. Every person who comes through, you record their name, where they came from, where they're going. Get their written statement that they're here voluntarily. Seems excessive, but when the law comes asking questions, and it will, you need proof. A rancher from near Tucson raised his hand. What if someone can't write or doesn't speak English? Then you write for them, but have witnesses present. 2 people minimum who can testify the statement is accurate. We've got forms in 3 languages now: English, Spanish, Apache. Working on getting Chinese translated too. Abraham Colfax, the lawyer from San Francisco, stepped forward. He had become a permanent fixture at Black Mesa, his initial case against the railroad having evolved into something larger. Legally, you're operating a charitable organization, Colfax explained. That gives you certain protections, but also responsibilities. You need to incorporate properly, establish bylaws, create a board of directors. Sounds bureaucratic, and it is, but it shields you from personal liability and makes it harder for adversaries to attack. An older woman from Phoenix spoke up. What about money? How do we fund something like this? Helen Cooper, who had taken on the role of treasurer, stood. Churches are your best source. Most have charitable funds. You present this as helping families in crisis, which it is, and many will contribute. Also, local businesses. We've found that shopkeepers and craftsmen often donate goods instead of cash. Food, clothing, tools. Just as valuable and sometimes easier to obtain. The training continued through the day. Sam taught how to treat common injuries without a doctor. Aita demonstrated tracking and wilderness survival, skills that refugees fleeing violence often needed. Tom Bridger explained how to spot and avoid troublemakers, how to screen people without being cruel. By evening, the 15 volunteers had notebooks full of information and heads full of possibilities. As they prepared to leave, several approached Caleb and Aita privately. "You've started something remarkable here," one man said. He was a baker from Prescott, middle-aged with kind eyes. "A year ago, I wouldn't have believed any of this was possible. Now I'm going home to make it happen in my town." "It won't be easy," Aita warned. "You will face opposition. People who benefit from others' suffering do not like losing that power." "I know. But you showed it can be done. If an Apache woman and a former ranger can stand against railroad companies and corrupt sheriffs, a baker can handle the town council." After they left, Caleb and Aita walked the property as had become their evening custom. The stars were brilliant in the cold air, and their breath made clouds of frost. 15 more, Caleb said. 15 safe houses spreading across Arizona. Maybe into New Mexico and Colorado, too. "It grows faster than I expected," Aita admitted. "Sometimes I worry we are building something too large to control." "Maybe control isn't the point. Maybe the point is setting something in motion and trusting others to carry it forward." They reached the cemetery plot near the cottonwood grove. Caleb had expanded it recently. 3 new graves had been added. A child who died of fever, despite Sam's best efforts. An old man who had arrived at Black Mesa in the final stages of illness, seeking only a peaceful death. And Luther Hicks, whose remains had been claimed by no one, and so were buried here with a marker that read simply, "A cautionary tale." Caleb stood before another grave, older than the others. His wife Elena and daughter Sarah, buried together. He visited less frequently now, not from forgetting, but from healing. "Do you think they would approve," he asked quietly, "of all this? Of you?" Aita considered the question seriously.
I think they would want you to be alive, not just surviving. And you are alive now. Perhaps that is approval enough. I am alive. Caleb turned to face her. And that's because of you. You know that, right? We saved each other. That is how it works when people choose to stand together. They walked back toward the house, where lights glowed warm in windows and voices drifted out into the cold night. Inside, Mary was teaching 3 younger children to read, her voice soft but clear. She had begun speaking 6 weeks earlier, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Her first complete sentence had been, "I am not afraid anymore." Margaret was preparing dinner, her movements efficient and calm. She had decided to stay at Black Mesa permanently, becoming the de facto house manager. Her husband had shown up once, demanding her return. Sam had informed him that assault charges were waiting if he set foot on the property again. He had not returned. Wade sat by the fire, sharpening tools, his massive hands surprisingly delicate with the whetstone. Tom and several newer residents played cards at the kitchen table, their laughter mixing with the smell of cooking food. This was home now, not just for Caleb and Aita, but for all of them. A family built not from blood, but from shared determination to survive, to resist, to live with dignity. A knock on the door interrupted the peaceful evening. Caleb answered to find Deputy Marshal Carson standing in the cold, hat in hand. "Evening, Caleb. Sorry to disturb. Need a word if you have time." They stepped out onto the porch. Carson looked uncomfortable, which immediately put Caleb on guard. "What is it?" "Wanted to give you advance warning. Governor's appointed a commission to investigate charitable organizations in the territory. They're specifically interested in places that house transient populations, starting their work next month." "Let me guess. The railroad suggested this investigation?" Carson nodded. "They've got lawyers claiming you're running an illegal boarding house, operating without proper licenses, creating public health hazards. All horseshit, probably, but the commission has legal authority. They can shut you down pending review." "How long would a review take?" 6 months? Maybe longer." Carson met his eyes. "I'm telling you this because I think what you're doing here is good. But you need to be prepared. Get your papers in order. Make sure everything is absolutely legal. They'll be looking for any excuse." After Carson left, Caleb called an emergency meeting. Everyone at Black Mesa gathered in the main room as he explained the situation. "So they're coming to shut us down," Wade said. "What do?" "We give them nothing to find," Colfax said. He had been staying at Black Mesa more often than San Francisco lately. "We have 30 days. In that time, we make this place so absolutely, perfectly legal that they can't touch us. Every form filed, every regulation met, every requirement exceeded." "Can we do that in 30 days?" Tom asked. "We don't have a choice. We do it or we close." The next month was a frenzy of activity. Colfax worked 16-hour days, filing incorporation papers,
drafting bylaws, obtaining licenses from territorial authorities. Sam cataloged medical supplies and treatments, creating records that would satisfy any health inspector. Helen organized the financial books with meticulous precision. Caleb and Aita conducted interviews with everyone currently at Black Mesa, documenting their stories, their reasons for being there, their plans for the future. Written statements, signed and witnessed, proving no one was being held against their will. They also made difficult decisions. Several residents who had legal troubles in other territories were quietly helped to move on before the commission arrived. Not because they had done anything wrong, but because their presence would create complications. Mary, now fully comfortable speaking, took on the role of interviewer for people who had trouble with English. Her gentle manner and shared experience as a survivor made people trust her. The work was exhausting, but it revealed something important. Black Mesa was no longer dependent on Caleb and Aita alone. A community had formed, with each person contributing skills and labor. When Caleb collapsed from exhaustion one evening, Wade carried him to bed and took over his duties without being asked. When Aita fell ill with a fever, Margaret nursed her while Helen managed the household. They had built something that could survive without its founders. The commission arrived on a gray morning in late February. 3 officials, stern-faced and carrying briefcases full of regulations. They spent 4 days at Black Mesa, inspecting every building, examining every document, interviewing every resident. Caleb and Aita watched with anxiety as the officials pored over their lives, looking for flaws. On the 4th evening, the lead commissioner, a severe woman named Harriet Blackwell, called everyone together. "I will be direct," she said. "We came here expecting to find violations. The complaints against this facility suggested chaos, illegality, possibly danger. What we found was the opposite." She consulted her notes. "Your documentation is exemplary. Your facilities exceed health and safety standards. Every person we interviewed confirmed they are here voluntarily and can leave at any time. Your financial records show no profit motive, only charitable work." She looked up. "In short, Black Mesa is operating exactly as a charitable organization should." Relief flooded through the room. "However," Blackwell continued, and the relief evaporated, "there are concerns about the broader network you're creating. Multiple facilities operating without central oversight could lead to problems. We're recommending that the territorial government create a formal framework for such organizations. Licensing requirements, regular inspections, accountability measures." "Are you shutting us down?" Caleb asked. "No, but you'll need to operate under the new framework once it's established, probably 6 months from now." Blackwell's severe expression softened slightly. "Off the record, what you're doing here is important work. The territory needs more places like this, not fewer. But it needs to be done properly, with oversight and standards. That protects both you and the people you help." After the commission left, there was celebration but also concern. New regulations meant new restrictions. Government oversight meant government control. "We knew this was coming," Colfax said. "Actually, it's better than I expected. They could have shut us down and arrested you. Instead, they're legitimizing what you do. That's a win." "Doesn't feel like a win," Tom muttered. "Because you're thinking short-term. Think long-term. 10 years from now, there could be hundreds of places like Black Mesa, all operating legally, all protected by territorial law. The railroad can't fight that. Corrupt officials can't shut that down. What we've built here becomes permanent." Aita, who had been quiet through the discussion, finally spoke. "The commission woman, Blackwell, she said something important. She said the territory needs more places like this. She is right. One ranch, even one network, is not enough. We need change at every level. What are you suggesting? Caleb asked. I am suggesting we think bigger. Not just safe houses, but laws. Not just helping individuals, but changing the system that creates victims in the first place. Sam leaned forward, interested. You're talking about politics. I am talking about power. Real power. The kind that comes from organizing people, from voting, from making politicians listen. Aita looked around the room. How many people have we helped in 6 months? 80? 100? Each one goes somewhere, starts over. They are voters now. They have voices. What if we organized those voices? The idea took root slowly. Over the following weeks, letters went out to everyone who had passed through Black Mesa. Not asking for money or support, just establishing connection. Letting people know they were part of something larger. The responses were overwhelming. People wrote back sharing their stories, their new lives, their gratitude. A farmer in New Mexico who had fled debt slavery and now owned his own land. A woman in Colorado who had escaped an abusive marriage and was teaching school. A family in California running their own small refuge for others in crisis. The network was bigger than anyone had realized. And it was growing. In March, Caleb received an unexpected visitor. Douglas Whitman, the railroad representative from months before, arrived alone in a simple buggy, no bodyguards, no companions. I come in peace, Whitman said from his buggy, hands visible, and with a proposition. Caleb kept his rifle close, but listened. The Southern Pacific has decided to route around your property. It costs us more, but the publicity from fighting you has been worse than the expense. Congratulations, Mr. Morrow. You won. That it? You came all this way to tell me I won? I came to offer employment. The railroad needs community liaisons, people who can work with local populations, resolve disputes before they become conflicts. You and your wife have demonstrated remarkable skill at that. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation. You want to hire us to help the railroad take other people's land? I want to hire you to help the railroad operate ethically, to be a conscience when corporate interests might override human concerns. Whitman smiled thinly. I know how that sounds, but I've watched what you built here. It impressed people at high levels. There's a desire to avoid future conflicts like the one with Crane. You could help make that happen. Caleb didn't need to think long. Not interested. Black Mesa is my work now. Can't do that and work for you. I expected as much. But the offer stands if you change your mind. Whitman prepared to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you won. The railroad has operated like a conquering army for too long. Maybe having opponents like you will make us better. After he left, Aita joined Caleb on the porch. He seemed sincere. Maybe. Or maybe it's a new strategy. Can't beat us with violence, so try to buy us instead. Either way, we said no. Aita leaned against the railing. But it makes me think. If the railroad is changing how it operates because of us, what else might change? What other systems might we influence? One thing at a time. We've got the regulatory framework to prepare for, the network to expand, and about 15 people currently living here who need help building their next chapters. One thing at a time, Aita agreed, but always thinking ahead, always building. Spring arrived with wildflowers and warm winds. Black Mesa's garden exploded with growth, providing more food than they could consume. The surplus went to families passing through,
provisions for their journeys forward. On a warm afternoon in April, Mary approached Caleb and Aita with a request. She wanted to go to California, to a teacher's college Sam had found that accepted women students. She wanted to become an educator, to teach other young women who had been silenced by violence that they could find their voices again. "You're leaving?" Caleb felt an unexpected pang. Mary had become like a daughter to both of them. Not leaving, moving forward, like everyone else who comes through here. Like you taught me to do. Mary smiled. "But I'll come back. This is home. I'll always come back." They helped her prepare. New clothes, books, letters of introduction from Sam and Helen. On the morning of her departure, the entire household gathered to see her off. "Remember what you learned here," Aita said, embracing her. "Remember that being afraid and being brave are not opposites. You can be both. The bravery comes from acting despite the fear." "I'll remember." Mary held her tight. "Thank you for saving me, for showing me I was worth saving." "You saved yourself. We just gave you space to do it." They watched her wagon roll away toward the morning sun, toward a future she was choosing rather than having chosen for her. "Does it ever get easier?" Caleb asked, watching them leave. "No, but it is not supposed to be easy. If it were easy, it would mean we did not care, and caring is the entire point." "No, but it is not supposed to be easy. If it were easy, it would mean we did not care, and caring is the entire point." 3 weeks later, on a warm May evening, they held a ceremony, not in a church, but under the cottonwood trees where Elena and Sarah rested. Sam officiated, Helen stood witness, Wade played harmonica softly. Margaret had sewn Aita a dress of white cotton with Apache beadwork at the collar, patterns her mother had taught her. Caleb wore his best shirt, the one he'd saved for occasions that never seemed to come. The residents of Black Mesa gathered in a quiet circle. Tom held a lantern. The newer families stood respectfully at the edges, understanding they were witnessing something sacred. "I've married folks for 40 years, Sam said, his voice carrying in the still air. "Never seen two people more already married than you two. But words matter. Promises spoken aloud become real in ways silence can't match." Caleb took Aita's hands. They were calloused from work, strong from labor, steady from purpose. "I promise to stand with you, to build with you, to fight beside you until my last breath. This ranch is ours. This life is ours. And I choose it every day." Aita's voice was clear, carrying the accent that she no longer tried to hide. "I promise to see you, to trust you, to make this place worthy of all who find it. You gave me more than shelter. You gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be. And I choose you, always." No rings. They didn't need them. The ranch was their promise, every fence post and garden row a vow kept daily. The people they'd saved were their witnesses. The land they'd defended was their church. When Sam pronounced them married, Wade's harmonica played soft and sweet, an old song about rivers and homecoming. The gathered crowd cheered, and someone whooped from the barn. Helen wiped tears with her apron, and for the first time since that day in redemption's dust, Aita and Caleb kissed. Not desperate, not hurried, just two people claiming each other in front of witnesses and God and the wide Arizona sky. "Now it's official," Helen laughed through her tears. "It was always official," Aita said, smiling at Caleb. "Now it is celebrated." They stayed under the trees as dusk deepened to night, accepting embraces and well wishes.
Mary's absence was felt, but in a good way. She was out there somewhere, becoming herself, just as they had taught her. When everyone had gone inside, Caleb and Aita remained by the graves a moment longer. "Elena would have liked you," Caleb said quietly. "Sarah, too." "I hope so." Aita laid a hand on the weathered stones. "Thank you for making space for me. I will honor that trust." They walked back to the house hand in hand, husband and wife, not just in name, but in truth. That evening, as stars emerged and the day's heat faded into comfortable coolness, Caleb and Aita sat on their porch. It had become their time, these quiet moments after everyone else had gone to bed, when they could simply be together without the weight of responsibility. "Do you ever miss it?" Caleb asked. "The quiet, when it was just us?" "Sometimes, but I would not go back. What we have built is bigger than quiet. It is purpose." Aita took his hand, something that had become natural between them. "Though I would not object to occasional quiet." Caleb laughed. "We could take a trip, go somewhere for a week. Wade and Margaret can run things." "Where would we go?" "Don't know. Somewhere with trees and water and no people asking for help." "That sounds perfect. We should do it." "We should." But both of them knew they probably wouldn't. There was always too much work, too many people needing help, too many problems requiring solutions. In the distance, a coyote called. Another answered. The eternal conversation of the wilderness, indifferent to human struggles, unconcerned with questions of justice and dignity. But for the people of Black Mesa, those questions were everything. They were the difference between merely existing and actually living, between accepting the world as it was and fighting to make it better. Inside the house, someone played a harmonica. Others sang along, voices blending in harmony. Outside, under the vast Arizona sky, two people who had every reason to give up had instead chosen to build. They had started with nothing but determination and pain. They had faced violence, corruption, and the crushing weight of systems designed to destroy people like them. And they had won. Not completely. The fight was never completely over. There would always be more people needing help, more systems needing change, more battles requiring courage. But they had proven something important, that ordinary people, working together, refusing to surrender, could make a difference, could save lives, could change worlds. Black Mesa had started as a refuge for two broken people. It had become a movement, and the movement was just beginning. Years later, historians would mark Black Mesa as the birthplace of the Territory Safe Haven Act, legislation that protected and funded charitable refuges throughout Arizona and eventually other Western territories. They would note that Aita Morrow, an Apache woman, had been instrumental in organizing Native and settler communities into political coalitions that changed territorial law. They would record that Caleb Morrow had trained hundreds of volunteers in establishing safe houses, that his methods had become standard practice for humanitarian organizations across the West. But that history was still ahead, unwritten, uncertain. For now, on this spring evening in 1883, there was only the present. Two people sitting together in the darkness, holding hands, the Arizona sky vast above them, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to fight for the dignity they believed all people deserved. "We did good work today," Caleb said quietly. "We did good work," Aita agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, not needing more words. Inside, someone laughed. A door creaked. Life continued, ordinary and precious. "Do you have regrets?" Caleb asked after a while. "About any of it?" Aida thought of her village burning, of Thomas dying, of standing in redemption's dust with blood on her mouth. She thought of the first time Caleb offered his hand, of learning to shoot, of Mary's first spoken words. She thought of all the people who had passed through Black Mesa, carrying pieces of this place with them into the world. "No regrets," she said finally. "Only gratitude." "For what?" "For refusing to kneel. For you refusing to look away." She squeezed his hand. "For us choosing each other, again and again, every single day." Caleb smiled in the darkness. "That's a good life. That is the only life worth living." They remained there until the cold drove them inside. Two people who had started as strangers, bound by desperation, and had become partners, bound by purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people needing help, new fights worth fighting. But tonight, under the vast Arizona sky, they were simply home. Black Mesa Ranch, once a refuge born from grief and necessity, had become something greater, a symbol that ordinary people could create extraordinary change. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That one act of kindness could ripple outward and transform the world. Years later, historians would document it all. The Territory Safe Haven Act, the network of refuges, the lives saved and transformed. But the real story was simpler and more profound. Two people refused to accept cruelty as inevitable. They stood when standing seemed impossible. They built when building seemed pointless. They chose hope when hope seemed foolish. And in choosing hope, they proved that it wasn't foolish at all. It was the only thing that ever really mattered. The end.